All right, morning. Walter here. 3 years. Today marks 3 years that I've been living in this room, room 14. I've got a brown armchair by the window, a dresser with 4 drawers, a photo of Dot on the nightstand, and a television that stays on all day out in the hallway because Harold from room 16 is a little hard of hearing and doesn't much care about that. 3 years. You know what nobody tells you? Not what you think nobody tells you. Not the, oh, it's going to be lonely or you're going to miss home kind of thing. Everybody says that. You already know that before you even walk in the door. What nobody tells you is what comes after what you already know. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because when I got here, March of 2021, 2 months after Dot passed, I came in thinking I had a pretty good idea of what was waiting for me. I figured I was prepared, not for the situation itself. Nobody's prepared for that. But I thought I knew enough that it wouldn't catch me off guard. It caught me off guard on just about everything. Let me back up a little. When Dot died, I stayed in our house in Dayton for 6 months. The same house we bought in 1987. 3 bedrooms, 1-car garage, that kitchen window that let in a real nice afternoon light. We spent 34 years in that house. 6 months alone inside it. I got by, made my own food, paid the bills, mowed the lawn when it needed it. I wasn't falling apart. But Richard would come visit, and he'd see something I couldn't see myself. He saw that I was getting smaller, not physically, but somehow I was shrinking inside that house. Stopping using certain rooms, stopping turning on certain lights, quit eating at the table, and started eating in the living room armchair. He wasn't wrong to be worried. We talked. He brought brochures. We went and looked at 2 or 3 places, and I ended up here at Cedarbrook, which is, look, it's not paradise, but it's not what I imagined either. The problem is that what I imagined was wrong in the wrong places. I figured it would be harder on the practical side and easier on the things you can't quite name. It was the other way around. The first thing I wish someone had told me, you're not going to feel at home for a good long while. And that's normal. The problem is, nobody warns you that a good long while might be close to a year. In the beginning, I woke up every morning with that feeling of being in a hotel. You know that disorientation? You wake up and for a second you don't know where you are. For most people, that passes in 2 seconds. For me, in those first few months, it took longer. I'd lie there staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. A ceiling that wasn't my ceiling, and I'd have to do this kind of mental inventory. Where I was, why, what came before this. It's not amnesia, it's just that the body is still waiting for a home that doesn't exist anymore, and nobody warned me it was going to last that long. So when it did, I figured something was wrong with me, thought I was stuck in a grief that should have been over by then. I was hard on myself in a way that didn't help anything. If I'd known beforehand, I would have been more patient with myself. That's all, just more patient. The second thing, and this one's harder to explain, is about the visits. You're going to have an idea of how the visits are going to go. And that idea is going to be wrong, not in the way you think. You're probably worried the visits will be too few, and maybe they will be. But what nobody tells you is that the problem isn't the quantity, it's the way they feel. When Richard used to come see me at the house in Dayton, he'd come and we'd be in the same space that had always been ours. The kitchen was the kitchen, the garage was the garage. We could sit in silence, and it wasn't strange because the silence had context. When he comes here to room 14, the silence is different. It doesn't have context. It's just 2 chairs and a television I leave off when he visits, and we have to fill the time in a way we never had to before. And you notice, at least I noticed, that some of the conversations we used to have were conversations about everyday life. Need to change the air filter. That leak came back. Small things. But those small things were the thread that connected us. Here, my everyday life is Cedarbrook. The breakfast that's sometimes good and sometimes isn't. The physical therapist who came on Tuesday. Harold and his television, and it's different. Not necessarily worse, but different. And it takes time to find a new way of being together. I wish I'd known that beforehand. Would have helped me be ready for that strangeness at the start, instead of reading it as coldness or distance when it wasn't. Something happened here about 4 months after I arrived. It was a Thursday afternoon. I don't even know why I remember it was Thursday, but it was. I was sitting here in this armchair, looking out the window, and look, the window in room 14 faces a parking lot. Not the greatest view in the world, but there's a tree off to the left that changes with the seasons, and I've come to appreciate that tree. I was looking at that tree and something occurred to me. It occurred to me that I hadn't done anything that day, literally nothing. Had breakfast, went to the dining room, came back to the room, sat here. Before, even after I retired, I always had something to do. There was the house, there was the upkeep, there was Dot, who sometimes needed something, and even when she didn't, her presence created a kind of structure to the day. The day had a beginning, a middle, and an end because of the meals we shared, the shows we watched, the small routines that form over 49 years of marriage without you ever noticing. And here, on that Thursday, I realized that nobody needed me for anything at all. Not in a dramatic way. It wasn't a crisis. It was more like a quiet realization. And oh, so this is how it is. And what caught me off guard was that it hurt more than I expected. I thought I'd feel relief. Came in here thinking, finally, I don't have to worry about leaks, electric bills, all of that. And that part was true. But what went away along with it was a feeling I didn't know I needed. The feeling of something depending on you. It's not about being useful in any grand sense. I'm not talking about legacy or purpose or any of those big words. I'm talking about something much smaller and much more concrete. The feeling that the day has a shape because something or someone needs you in order for it to have that shape. When Dot was alive and sick, I took care of her. Gave her the medication, took her to the doctor, stayed up nights when the pain kept her from sleeping. It was heavy, it was exhausting, but the day had shape. Here, the day doesn't have shape in the same way, and I had to learn to give it shape on my own without relying on anybody else's need. That took time. It's still in progress, honestly. What I did was small. It wasn't heroic. I started offering to help with a few things around here. Not because anyone asked, just because I realized I needed it. There's a small garden by the entrance of Cedarbrook, and I went and talked to the staff and said I could help tend to it. Not always, not every day. But when I was up for it, they said yes. And look, it didn't fix everything. It didn't. But 2, 3 times a week, when the weather's decent, I go out there with my gloves and do something with the plants. Sometimes it's not much, but it's something that needs me to happen. Small like that size. If I'd known that before I came in, that I'd need to build myself a purpose on a small scale, not wait for someone to hand me a large one, I would have started sooner. Would have spent less time waiting for life in here to make sense on its own. Let me say something about sleep for a second, because nobody talks about sleep. I spent my whole life sleeping on the left side of the bed. 49 years it was the left side. Dot slept on the right, near the door, because she got up more times in the night and didn't want to wake me. That's just how it was. When she died, I kept sleeping on the left side. In the Dayton house, there were still 2 sides, and somehow that was a strange kind of comfort. Her absence had a location. Here the bed is smaller. There isn't really a left side and a right side the same way. And for about 2-3 months, I woke up every night at 3 in the morning, not from a nightmare, not from pain, just woke up, lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come back. I mentioned it to the nurse. She offered me something for it. I said no. What I learned, and it took a while, was that at 3 in the morning, there's no use trying to force sleep. I started getting up, turning on the small lamp on the nightstand, and spending a little time with the tablet. Sometimes I'd read. Sometimes I'd sit with photos of Dot, of Richard when he was young, of a trip we took once in 1998. That was the one and only time we ever really went anywhere outside Ohio. It passed. Not all at once, but it passed. What I wish someone had told me. The body takes longer than the mind. The mind understands that you moved. The body still doesn't know. There's one last thing, and this one's the hardest to say. I came in here with shame, not out loud. I never talked about it, but it was there. A quiet shame, the kind you don't even quite admit to yourself. Because in my generation, in my family, in the way I learned things, you take care of your own at home. You don't send your father, your mother, your father-in-law to a nursing home. That was something people did when they'd given up, when they'd turned their back. And there I was, on the other side of it. Richard brought me here because it was needed. I needed it. He needed it. It was the right thing to do given the circumstances we had. I know that rationally. But shame doesn't work rationally. Shame keeps telling you that you should have been different, that your family should have been different, that somehow you failed or were abandoned. And both things at the same time. I carried that for a good while without saying a word. Until one day, it was during a conversation with the priest who comes here once a month, I said it, not in any neat way. It came out crooked, in pieces, without a clear beginning or end. But it came out, and he said something simple. Said that shame lives in the dark and gets smaller when you bring it into the light. Doesn't disappear, just gets smaller. It wasn't a miracle, but it was true. What I wish someone had told me before. If you're carrying shame about being here, about how you got here, about how your family came to this decision, tell someone. Not because it'll fix everything, but because keeping it in doesn't help. And I proved that to myself in those first few months. 3 years. Sometimes I still wake up with that disorientation. Less than before, but it still happens. Richard's coming next week. His kids are coming with him because it's a holiday. I'll be glad to see them, and then I'll feel a little empty when they leave. And then the emptiness will pass. That's how it is. The tree out there is starting to bud again. Every spring I'm surprised it comes back. I shouldn't be surprised anymore, but I am. Anyway, I hope that helped some. Take care of yourself.